Hello, and welcome to a new Let's Play. This is Northstar. For those of you new to my channel, you've got to be kidding me. They had a freaking launcher screen just so they can advertise the other games. These assholes. For those of you new to my channel, I am a disabled biomedical researcher who worked as an EMT most recently before returning to school, but trained in biomedical research and was going to school to refresh and expand upon those skills, and was going to almost certainly get work as at least someone with a advanced education, multiple degrees, uh, um, multiple graduate degrees, specifically. I was trying to get into medical school when I was disabled with long COVID. This is from some old games. Just gonna delete these. Come on, look at how I return to them. So, you guys are going to see me play this game for the first time on YouTube. This game is made by Jujubee. I have a nit to pick with these devs. They're assholes. They abandoned the original game, this one, after DLC New Power, which is released not before long before they banned the game, to do Realpolitiks 2. Then they proceeded to abandon Realpolitiks 2 before it was completely fixed, all the bugs and such, and still had some major issues, to now do Realpolitiks 3. When I submitted a bug report to these pricks about a major issue that can cause a crash in this game, they were rude, dismissive, and hostile all at the same time in their email response to my bug report. They are jackasses. And yet, there are some redeeming features of this game despite that. Now, I've already done all the Steam achievements because one thing about this game is that it's addictive. And you can sit here and play it for hours and hours, but there are major flaws with the design. The game has a clear right-wing bias, and it even encourages genocide and ethnic cleansing in a way. It doesn't specifically name it as such, but if you play a nation, there are accepted and non-accepted cultures. If you end up conquering a nation with a non-accepted culture, the game all but forces you to go about removing that culture. So let's say I pick Israel here. If I conquer Palestine, which here is just showing the West Bank and completely ignoring Gaza on the map, I would have constant issues with the conquer culture unless I did a cultural assimilation thing, which is just flat out removing the culture. Also, democracy, my ass. Try authoritarianism. Heck, I think in some stars they even have the U.S. as authoritarian. Not in this one. The ones they're calling democracies, bullshit. They have the U.S. on the age of authoritarianism. Greece, authoritarian, right? That's bullshit. They just happen to have some socialist elements that the devs don't like because, among other problems, this game has, as I said, a clear right-wing bias. Still, you can play at all sorts of scenarios in it. And it's a game of conquest. It's a game of essentially fascism, conquest, forced cultural assimilation, oppression. You shall see. I've done some ridiculous things in this game, and you can basically conquer the world as anyone. The one thing you can't change is your accepted cultures, which there are a few events, such as the United States can add Mexican culture as an accepted culture. But, you can even do a kind of old wounds. Yeah, this is basically Nazis 2.0. Old wounds. take control of Alsace-Lorraine, Belgium, and Netherlands within 20 years. Regain what is, quote, ours. Yeah, that should tell you something about the game that they have that in it. There's also a New World Order scenario. Well, the world is broken into a zillion pieces. It's basically the sandbox fractured Earth. Although one of the problems with it that they could have fixed and didn't is that all the major trade straits, like, say, the Bosphorus, don't exist anymore. As if the Bosphorus would suddenly cease to be a major area for world trade. In this fantastic free-for-all scenario where every province has the same starting score, population, GDP, and resource level. To win, you must come first in the score ranking. Cran Taco? Really? Some of the names are a little ridiculous. United States, Bancaria, or the dawn of tomorrow. World War III is come and gone. For years, the Earth burned with nuclear fire. The old empires fell, and from the ashes, new world order emerged. But not all conflict, which is literally a fascist saying new world order, but not all conflicts were resolved. Wounds are still bleeding. Anger still blinds. And many wish to grab their weapons once more. After all, humanity never learns, and war never changes. So it's a little bit of a Fallout reference there. But there's Europia. While some European countries prefer to remain independent, that does not mean we can't try to have an alliance with them in the spirit of the old European Union from half a century ago. With them on our side, and with the termination of other dangers, we should feel safe on our own continent. In order to win, keep Germany, Italy, and Spain in your bloc, and make sure South Germany and Southern France do not exist for 2070. Note that South France is Muslim. It's literal fear-mongering about Muslims being incompatible with Western cultures sort of shit. That disgusting but bigotry is pushed into this game. Space Odyssey. The planet is lost. Damage from the wars are irreparable. We must secure a future someplace else. And this time we'll do it right. In order to win, control the provinces of Phobos, Mars, and Deimos before 2070. Fight the unbelievers. We must clear Europe of the threat of Islamic terrorism before it's too late. To do so, we must first take back their bridgeheads in Europe and then make our own in Africa. To win control of the provinces of southern France and Provence, then release Tunis, Tripoli, and Cyrenaica as independent countries. Can you tell? It's some fascist shit. Or the world is not enough, which is supposedly based on our own world. Right. One of the more interesting ones can be to play as Paraguay. That might seem an odd thing to say, but there is a religion that will emerge in this game in Paraguay. Of course, they have Uruguay is more economically powerful. Nonsense. I mean, maybe it's got a more powerful economy at this particular moment, but and less militarily powerful. Uruguay is historically a police state. Around this time, also stars Panama. The Panama Canal wasn't a bad thing to have. Or Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic. This game of conquest is hard to conquer over the seas early. Venezuela with a 4-star economy? Really? Probably because they have lots of natural resources. Gotta pick something. I don't want to sit here and talk forever. Certain countries, especially in Europe, have various types of pre-programmed events. Probably one of the more interesting ones is the reunification of Yugoslavia into two blocks, East Yugoslavia and West, which is Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina versus Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, and Macedonia. Things distance to neighboring nations makes a small difference. So, hey, let's do Macedonia and do a kind of Alexander the Great run. Why not? I'm not trying to get the high score. Does not matter, but this will be a shortish. Oh yeah, and Ukraine starts with Crimea and the Donetsk under Russian control, just outright annexed. So unless a war goes on, I do believe. Oh no, they don't even. Well, no, I think they have territorial claims, so there will be wars that usually occur. That's the thing that happens. But yeah, this would be a hard start, but with a tiny nation, but it will allow me to. This country will have severely limited gameplay options due to its weak economy and low military level. Does you want to continue? Yeah, with enough time, you can overcome any start like that. War between Sudan and South Sudan. That's not terribly historically inaccurate. Keep getting these bloody hints. Goodbye. I knew what there. So yeah. It's a war-torn area. It's often easier to tell where the borders begin and end instead of using this political map to use a relations map. Sudan, South Sudan. You can take a simplified view or show more of the territory. It'll run a bit faster this way. This game is poorly optimized. So let's do this. Look at a nation at a glance. South Sudan's got fraction of the population. Much higher resource ratio to its population, which is, of course, why there's wars in the real world there. It's over oil. So, Macedonia has 10 natural resources. That's not terrible. This music usually bugs the heck out of me eventually. So let's turn it down. All right. And view relations. You can see various relations modifiers with different nations. Historical relations with Greece, -5. I mean, that's probably not surprising and is at least somewhat accurate. Macedonia, let's see how they model this particular bit. Yeah, they start off as civilization orthodox, right? Because there's Western civilization and then there's orthodox. So it creates a block with, say, Russia being another example of an orthodox Christianity. So yeah, a lot of it's along religious lines because there's some like Christo-fascist shit built into this game, unfortunately. And the devs will ardently deny it, and I'm probably get a rude message from one of them at some point. Oh, how dare you denigrate our game? How dare you create a crap game, abandon it, move to another sequel, abandon it, and fill your game with right-wing biases. So just wait till you see how socialism is represented in this game. It's ridiculous. And the economic, the way you're encouraged to run your economy is purely right-wing nonsense. Okay. Now, it's been a little bit, but there's some things that are always good. Often you want to get propaganda and didn't do Stubotnik, which is basically kind of voluntary economic community service. It's what it's represented to be. That gets you national media on the way, which will bump your score. You notice everything has costs, including maintenance costs. Some scale, it's hard to see when you're tiny, but some scale more strongly with GDP, number of provinces, or population. So there's things that can be worthwhile when you're small, not later. When you're really small, nothing is very cost effective, unfortunately. Yeah, ad hoc stuff can be great, but you have to have the prereqs for it. Let's see, what's the unemployment rate? Development, medium, unemployed, 20%. Ah, that's not entirely unrealistic in that regard. That hurts population growth quite strongly. And especially when you're a small nation, you need population growth. So, have fight unemployment. Spontaneous financing for companies increase the number of employees and uh do a super parents grand lottery. It's one way to increase your population growth. Or start working on immigration policies or healthcare policies. Looks like when you're this small, this is the easy way to go. 5-2 upkeep versus 3-3. Action points are much more important than money or immigration policy, which also gives you all sorts of negative events because there's an anti-immigrant bias in this game. Um, yep. So I'll start with these two ad hoc decisions. Now, part of the reason for focusing on employment, which hurts population growth and population growth early, is because the way economic development is handled in this game is low, medium, or high levels of economic development. The lower your level of economic development, the more of a you get a buff to GDP growth. So it's at 0.2% when you're medium, for instance. And also gives a buff to so you have higher population economic growth when you're at lower GDP. But you have lower HDI. You get a HDI buff. It's larger, high than medium, higher medium than low. So what you can end up happening is you have enough GDP growth to say claw into the medium range, but whenever you push into high, you end up at negative GDP growth and you fall back, or enough to just barely push into medium, but then you fall back to low each time. In addition to ensure you spiral that you kind of adds a little instability, but there is a world economic situation you can't control really that will influence this and tends to, as the game goes on, become quite negative and bad. It more often hurts you than helps you. I.e., the world economy is somehow always in recession, which probably isn't terribly inaccurate to our own world either, in that there's always an excuse the world economy is in recession or countries doing badly because, well, there's constant crises in capitalism. Um, but yeah, because economic development levels are based on GDP to population ratio. If you grow your population, you can have a larger economy while being a current given development level. So basically, you can get a larger total economy even though you won't have more money per person. But this is particularly important if you're going to build up your military to expand beyond being tiny. Because, it costs the same amount for a tank division, whether you have 20 people, well, population, tiny numbers in this game. So whether your population is 2 or 2,000. So When you're really small, you want to grow your population. When you're really large, you often want to shrink it because a lot of things are less cost effective with large populations. So 300 and shrinking, for instance. And your population size also determines how many military units you can field, which you don't need an enormous number since the scheme doesn't give any real advantage to having a bigger army. It should. But there's not much difference between attacking with 200 infantry or 20. But you can only train units up to your cap. And it takes a while to train new ones. So you want to have enough that you have forces you need and that you can just be continuously cycling new units through training to replace losses. And you have a large economy to sustain all this. So basically, really small countries desperately need population growth. They're going to conquer stuff. Although there's issues with the more population, the more natural resources you need. If I go over the economy tab, you'll see currently I'm in industrial economy, not a services economy, which requires more human development to attain and to maintain. You get a debuff to GDP growth if you don't have the HDI. Gives an action point bonus, although at higher levels you mostly spend those action points just maintaining a lot of the stuff that you need just to maintain the HDI level. You actually can end up having worse HDI, but one of the big benefits of a service economy is it consumes less natural resources per person. So industry requires one natural resource. It's rounded down to 0 for services economy right now, though it does require some. It's just less for a given size of your GDP. GDP is, you can't actually grow it forever. It's capped in a certain amount per province, which GDP actually lives on the province level in this game, even though you see the national numbers. And so you won't get the GDP growth rate you're expecting when some of their provinces are capped, because it'll grow at the rate listed only in the ones that have room to grow. And you can't grow your economy forever, though. It gets something, I think the limit is like 1,000 GDP per province, and give you an idea how much bigger. Right now, Macedonia is 50. So I could grow the economy something like 20-fold before it cap out. I think it was 1,000, or maybe it was 10. I've hit it before in games, but yeah, and to reinforce the right-wing biases in this game, it basically strongly encourages you to set taxes as low as possible to increase GDP growth. In fact, many times, if you increase taxes, you don't increase GDP growth income proportionally. For instance, taxes of 60% or just under. Tax income 37, 30%, 31. Even though double the percent should be giving double the income, it doesn't come anywhere close to it. But it has crushing effects on GDP to set taxes like this high. Minus 0.44% a month GDP growth, which is to say you're losing like 6% a year, almost 5 or 6% a year, versus minus 0.12 or 30. And you can't, the minimum tax level is set by your interventionism level. So if you have social programs, you have to have higher taxes, even if you don't need it to afford the programs. Right-wing bias all the way through the game. Taxes being ineffective but hurting economic growth. But if you have social programs, you need them, even if you've grown your economy massively. So there's never a point where you can grow your economy big enough to afford social programs while still keeping taxes low. It's bullshit. Every bit of it is bullshit. Everything in this game is meant to reinforce right-wing biases. But this came out around a time where there was a lot of media doing this crap. You saw, particularly problematically, you saw this game doing it. You saw Democracy 4, whereas 3 ended up pushing, without the devs probably intending it, left-wing policies. In Democracy 4, right-wing nonsense is very much the way to go. The worst thing was the hack job they did of universal basic income, where it doesn't increase GDP growth, which is nonsense because they have sales tax, for instance, and payroll tax decrease GDP growth. Anything that takes money out of people's pockets, they were having that lead to less GDP growth. Okay, fine, but then putting money in people's pockets should increase economic growth. The counterbalance to that being you need to raise taxes to forward UBI, and you may hurt economic growth overall. But if you've stored up, say, a ton of money for a long time and have massive national reserves, or you're willing to run up the debt, which has a delayed harmful effect in your growth, in your economy, you should be able to do that, and it should stimulate GDP growth, at least in the short run in that game. It's nonsense, but just pushing right-wing ideas regardless of facts. And that's unfortunately very common with some of these right-wing devs. If they personally have right-wing beliefs, they push in their games. This is unlike, say, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which I do a Let's Play series of. It is much fairer with how it handles left and right-wing ideas. All right, tasks. You get these. They're basically like little quests, and you get a reward, which for a small nation can be enormous compared to, universal military service. No. That's actually quite a substantial investment to get. Oh, no, wait. Well, yeah, it's still expensive to maintain. I'm not going to be conquering anything right now, and I'd rather free up the task spots for other things. So I can resign it. Can't go into negative with score. If there was a button to hotkey to decrease the speed. Pause is that. I don't remember there being a. Doesn't even have a hotkeys listing. The UI in this game is terrible. Import infrastructure. Why would I be importing anything at this point? I'm going to say no. I have no score. For that matter, no score income. Not going to be trying to win this particular game. Probably. Might do it almost by accident, but it's hard to compete with, say, the score income of, say, the US or Russia. Not going to be the most powerful nation in the world before the game ends, most likely, is Macedonia. Well, it doesn't really end. You can keep playing just past the date where it decides arbitrarily if you've won or lost. Alright, Super Parents Grand Lottery is in place. Somewhat stabilizing my population. It's still shrinking, but there's money being lotteried out to parents. Let's see. Ba, 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 ba. Hmm. Currency wars can be useful if your interventionism is low. But yeah, on top of higher interventionism forcing a higher minimum tax rate, the game has interventionism at higher levels hurt economic growth. More right-wing bias. So if you do this currency wars, it's likely to hurt your growth more than help. Because interventionism target +2, relations the whole -5, and GP growth is only plus 0.05%. Plus there's upkeep to that. Excuse me. Let's go with diplomatic missions 1. For skilled specialists abroad to help improve productivity at home. Can you do that, or the internal politics route? But it'll get a nice little lump sum of action points, which you need for a lot of things, including, raising an army to maybe conquer a neighbor early and expand. So. Task, better way of life. Raise the HDI level by 10. It's not horrendously hard, and that is a lot of action points and score. Easiest way to do that is to set up basically state tertiary schools, state universities. Not even universal education. Not universal college, just some state universities. Which is also required for certain things like you need it for financial economics theory. Which you need for financial sector supremacy if you want to do it, or where is it? Superfective bureaucracy unique requires it, and digital bureaucracy. These uniques have a massive cost, so just another way for nations that are doing real well and are big to get further ahead. Game has a snowball effect, but you can always start snowball from small. As long as you don't run afoul of the big dogs before you're big yourself. Again, this game encourages a very fascist outlook on the world, but running a bit of a deficit now. But yeah, I don't mind raising human development. That should be easy enough. Population still shrinking, even with the super parents grand lottery. Lowering unemployment will help with it in the long run, though. Academic education. Yep, I was about to do that. The game is thankfully having some synergistic bonuses. What it's worth. Happiness target is 9% unhappiness. This is in large part due to unemployment, but also due to the game considering Macedonia to be, quote, authoritarian, and mainly just because of high levels of interventionism. That is, oh, socialism equals authoritarianism type nonsense. Bullshit. One of the many biases in this game. So if you have a basic, not even basic, if you have universal health services, for instance, or strong labor laws, which is actually under economy, just having any labor laws, in fact, pushes you towards being supposedly authoritarian. It's nonsense. It's pure freaking nonsense. Anyways, grab academic education. Higher HDI makes statistical measurement of citizens' level of development, education, income required for projects shortens army production and projects implementation time. So everything I'm doing gets quicker with higher HDI. New task for a rainy day. Save over 2,000 money. For a teeny tiny nation like mine, that's an enormous amount. Many years of income. Not gonna say the payoffs are nothing, but no. Rage of war. It's too quiet around here. Ready up the generals and let's go to war. Well, yeah, I'm gonna do that sooner or later, and that's a lot of resources for such a small country. So, yeah. Starts taking loans automatically because I'm running a debt. Tax revenue is down partly because the world economy is not doing great. Actually, world economy seems to be doing all right now. Probably in large part the super parents. Yeah, that plays a part in it. But no, project maintenance. You can see I didn't add that much even with high employment. It's 8. I'd still be running in deficit. So yeah, basic bureaucracy, basic infrastructure, simple education. Yeah, it's just mostly a matter of... Wait, minus 38 projects and events. Okay, this doesn't even add up. Because my total project maintenance should be 11, 14, 17, 19. Should be half what it's telling me. I'm paying twice as much as I'm supposed to be paying for project maintenance. And while they have this whole uh, interventionism leads to higher project costs, it's 0.86%, not double. Does allow you to borrow more debt at least. That's higher max and min taxes. Higher interventionism hinders growth but offers more security in times of crisis. Supposedly, it was supposed to do that. If it had worked as intended, you would see less harm to your GDP growth rate when the world economy is doing poorly. But you'd have slower growth in times where it's doing well. That would have been realistic and would have led to something like the Soviet economy, where they grew more slowly than the West when the world economy is doing well, or most. There's a boom bust cycle in capitalist economies, but better grew faster when it was doing poorly. And so overall, their long-term growth rate was actually higher than that of the West, and they were slowly growing to the point they would have eventually eclipsed the United States. They didn't have much personal political freedom. It would be a legitimately authoritarian, but not because of interventionism, because of high levels of personal control and militarism. That would make it authoritarian. That at least would be accurate. But the interventionism thing is nonsense and feels almost slid in, especially with the way interventionism doesn't do what it promises in terms of providing security in times of crisis. What's the easiest way to increase the number of jobs? Why expanding the bureaucracy in government offices, of course. It's time to find permit A38. So it increases project maintenance, which is already not, which is currently not that much, but way more than it should be. It costs 50 action points. I believe that's a fixed amount, so for big nations, it makes sense. Yeah, not worth it for a small nation with so little AP. Alright. And you get these election events periodically. All nations apparently have elections this game. System will change to democracy. Authoritarian nations can vote changes, and one of the factors you see decreasing personal control, militarism, interventionism. Of these, the game always rewards militarism because it allows you to have a bigger army and pay less in upkeep. Personal control has a small effect on the likelihood of rebellions and terrorist events, but generally you want less personal control. And interventionism, they just treat it as an unconstrained negative because game was clearly made by free market nuts. No, I don't want to hear your nonsense about anti-warmonger resolution. International justification for military conflict against 3 countries with warmonger level above 45. So, Russia, India, and China are against it, and everyone else is for. And France is proposing it. I'm trying to remember let's see, what countries might currently be affected. Probably Russia. No, they have no warmonger right now. Ukraine. They are the ones with claims in eastern Ukraine. Russia doesn't have any on the western part. Although if they lose control of it, you always have claims in territory you lose, so they're pushed back. Anyways, I can set taxes over now. Bit of waiting here. This is going to pass. Canada joins the bloc of the United States. Bangladesh joins the bloc of India. So yeah, the blocs are like alliances, but very limited the number of countries you can have in them. It's kind of irritating the way it works. Some of these things I'm sure are improved in Realpolitiks too, but they're huge problems in that game. From what I've seen of people who play it, and I'm nothing if not angry at the devs for the nonsense that they've pulled with how they abandoned this game and mistreated me when I asked for a bug fix. I mean, there are people who release bug fixes for games. There are studios who are fixing games like 12 years later. It builds goodwill in your community. It shows that you're dedicated to the quality of your product. It doesn't always have to make economic sense on how many people are still buying your game. And if they're not getting enough sales, they should probably lower the price of the game, not to try and increase the volume of sales. Not sit there and just abandon support for the game. Maybe invest a little more in advertising. The game has some cute things like the loading screen portraits of like Obama and Putin. You'll see some of them occasionally in these videos if I make this a series, but they do not have money shortage, which is really just saying I'm running a deficit. Eventually, I'll go bankrupt from the debt. Yeah, one of the problems of the game is you get phantom upkeep on projects that you shouldn't even have. This doesn't even have an upkeep. I should literally only have 19 upkeep right now, but there's a phantom. Let's see, this should be the accurate number, but it's not. Project and event upkeep is twice that. There's some hidden event that hurts Macedonia's wealth or something, just to keep them weak. Because they don't expect people to play them that much. They expect to just make them punching bags for the bigger nations, and then get debuffs to make sure these little countries don't do anything. Alright. Got some action points now. It's worth noting you could do something like this. This would more than triple the size of my economy. I still have 51. It would roughly triple it. It would, of course, drive me to bankruptcy with that much cost, but I would have already paid this out. So if I'm willing to lose all my action points in reserve, except for a diplomacy buff with the whole world, I could start some advanced industries. I just need infrastructure 3. It's a cheeky thing you can do as a really small nation. Basically borrow massive debt for some government subsidized high-tech industries and like triple the size of your economy overnight, even though you go bankrupt doing it. But you need substantial amounts of money even to get infrastructure 3. And I'll cancel most projects that have upkeep when you do that. I don't remember if I lose simple education. I think it pushes you all the way back to the most basic. So you might still have basic infrastructure, simple education, or might not. I even have to repeat those, but it's worth it for that much GDP growth overnight. Yeah, they put bureaucracy over here. You can do statism as a way to decrease unemployment. With such a small country, it's not terribly expensive. But the key thing is the unemployment growth. There aren't many things directly affected, and otherwise you're left just trying to grow the economy, which can be a very long-term thing. Will a nation might not survive long enough for that? But yeah, take control of the total control of the economy lies in the hands of the state. That can ironically be quite a good idea for a tiny little country. this game. Oh. The costs are nothing to sneeze at. Just improve bureaucracy can massively increase the debt. Probably need a little money first. But either going up infrastructure or statism routes or both. Yes, the game, when you have a tiny, weak economy, socialist stuff can work. But when you're big, it's all free market nonsense. The scaling is all messed up. Where one is unquestionably better if you're small, and one is unquestionably better if you're big, and there's no, like, ability to make either work in either situation very well. Internal political advancement. Okay, no, that doesn't. You have to go up that. There's a couple that give you lump sum money. Economic modernization, though, probably the first. Doesn't cost anything. Gives not a ton of money, but it can help with keeping the debt down from growing as quickly, so that I can keep taxes lower longer or have less frequent bankruptcies. Entire army is 2 infantry. 2 infantry. That's just enough to maybe prevent if I get a riots event from from instantly losing. That's about all that's good for. I'd still have to train a bunch of units in a hurry. Interestingly, it only costs 1 to maintain. Which is weird because each infantry is supposed to cost 1 in upkeep. I'm not sure if you always get 1 free or probably just rounding. Militarism slightly decreases the number, and it rounds down. It's not saying it does. War between South Korea and North Korea. This can lead to one winning, and the Korean Peninsula being reunited can also lead to nuclear war. South Korea is in a block with Mongolia. Okay. And nuclear war can lead to nuclear winter if enough nukes are launched. Yeah, North Korea is 15, not nearly enough to cause that many problems. Now, war between Russia and the US, on the other hand. Stay low, nuclear winter. Stock exchanges, which can give you some nice amount of income and money so that you potentially not have to keep your taxes as high. But they constantly get attacked by foreign spies and shut down, and it's expensive to open a new one. And nuclear missiles were just launched. Said an HQ attack. Who did it, though? It's not. North Korea still has 15 nukes. Oh, who's China at war with? India. Okay, yeah, that's why. It did look like India or China had fired some up. 40-48, yeah, I'm pretty sure it has China's having launched some nuclear weapons. Warmonger, 33. Yep, China tried to nuke the military headquarters of India. Probably failed, but that particular thing has a high chance of failure. Poland joined the bloc of the United States. Singapore joined the bloc of Japan. At least Singapore and Japan makes some sense since they both have pretty authoritarian right-wing governments. The U.S. doesn't often talk about in that way because they're very capitalist, but Singapore is basically, some people have described it as Disneyland with the death penalty. Singapore is basically authoritarian, almost a police state, but hyper-capitalist. Therefore, the U.S. loves it. Although there's a lot of state capitalism, it's not even all free market. There's just certain sectors that are very, very unregulated, and the U.S. can make money hand over fist with. But particularly the housing market is heavily state controlled in Singapore, and the land usage, it's heavily regulated, and a lot of land is directly owned by the state. But almost everything else is completely deregulated in Singapore, and therefore it's a democracy. No, it's really more of an authoritarian country, just as Japan, which has had only a single party elected to government since the end of World War II, is pretty much an authoritarian country as well. Something, again, the U.S. never talks about because they're allies, and you can only be authoritarian if you're anti-U.S., according to the bullshit propaganda. Some point I'm probably gonna have to go to war with Greece because of this opinion debuff, but they've got some nice amount of territory, so if I can raise a bigger army in them. I only have 3 provinces, so that's 3 wars. But yeah, except Alexander the Great actually came from what would be the province of Greece proper in this game. Came from not the Republic of Macedonia, but Macedonia is in this region here, around Thessalonica. Peace in Sudan. How'd that go? South Sudan lost some territory. And will probably be eliminated the next such war. Arabian, Islamic, Neolithic, African as their accepted cultures. So, yeah, Sudan will have trouble with the African culture, and the AI doesn't really do the forced cultural assimilation thing. That basically just ends up being a thing for the player. This is pointing out that nations could attack China if they wished. It would be dumb for me to do it unless I wanted, for some reason, to have China force me to their system, which the game considers totalitarian, which is nonsense. There's some definite anti-China bias in this game. It's probably would be considered authoritarian. A long-last Chinese conflict is fine-fish. There's only one China. So, somehow their war with India led to them controlling Taiwan. I'm guessing Taiwan had allied with India or something. I think that's who they were fighting. Were they fighting the United States? Who were they fighting? I don't know. Anyways, China launched an attack and took Taiwan in 2022 here. This game was, of course, made before the coronavirus pandemic, which hit right around 2020. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was made in like 2019. The new Power DLC has some references to it indirectly. Economic modernization, a little money. Pay down the debt. I'll just not borrowing more again, but debt costs are still -3 either way. Game automatically borrow enough for anything I need to spend on. Small nations basically have to import arms because the stamp and arms industry is incredibly expensive. As is something like trying to do a space program. Satellites. Not unrealistic. Except an infantry training center for a score, I suppose. Could be useful if you're doing the fragmented world thing. 20 whatever 50 or starter, not 2050, 2020, 2222 starter of that one, the fragmented world. This doesn't even give a single AP per month. Amusing. Could sell off some natural resources. 3 money per month for 5 natural resources. I only need 1 right now. It is profitable, although costs 1 AP in maintenance. This does so 2 AP in maintenance for 3 money. That's actually a bad trade-off because there's certain fixed costs for the export structure. Yeah, probably just need to keep running up that economic modernization line for a little while. At least in fighting unemployment. Which should start to slowly fix the negative population growth. Yep, unemployment goes down every month. And population growth is now a bit better. It's only minus 0.03%. And eventually I'll go into positive population growth. Starting to turn things around that way. Boom. Money. Money. So I basically got filthy rich just and could pay off my entire debt just opening a public university in Macedonia. Cool. Sign our debt. Sign our 3 gold a month in debt interest costs, which is substantial. That's for such a tiny nation. That's enough to run many projects. Have less than that upkeep. In the gold portion, anyways. Consider attacking Albania. Now they're in the block of Turkey. Yep. Bulgaria. This is a rage of war thing. You could try and attack Bulgaria. GP size 150. Much bigger than my own. About 3 times the economy, but their military isn't drastically larger. Or Kosovo, even though eventually going to event to possibly unify with them. Currently, they're alliance with Turkey, though. Serbia. Bigger military, smaller economy. Yeah, for now. Probably need to do that trick with infrastructure I talked about. Oh, no, it's too expensive. New World Trade Organization. Lots of debt. Oh. Hmm. This was 60. What am I doing for time? An hour. What a. I did universal remote education. Costs a bit, but it would allow me to sustain a service economy. Probably not a good idea though. Immigration policy. It's usually cheaper to do immigration policy to grow your population than healthcare, which there's some right-wing political undertones to that, but it's not entirely unrealistic, at least that. And if I get to point system with immigration, I can do full-scale immigration. That's the second thing. So, yep. Probably best to grow my population some. Immigration policy. Immigration policy management. Accept immigrants into your country. I'm doing economic modernization, which will put off invade Kosovo and turn it into a, quote, democracy. That actually gets some serious money. Paramilitary groups, which could also be done. Increase militarism a bit. Might allow me to support slightly larger military. Probably would cancel it soon after doing. Yeah, Kosovo is small, weak. Their economy is even smaller than mine. Their military is oversized for their tiny country, but I could probably raise a large army and beat them in a war if they left the bloc of Turkey. So I wait for an opportunity and then maybe complete those quests. Macedonia invades Kosovo. Some parts of history repeat themselves, sort of. Or if history doesn't repeat itself, it at least rhymes. As Mark Twain once said, history does not repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. Sanctions against totalitarianism. So sanctions against a nation they consider totalitarian, which includes China. Looks like it's going to pass. Is this going to reduce the army limit of those countries? Not a big deal for China with its large population. It's not really actually that harmful the way sanctions are done in this game, whereas in real life sanctions crush a country's economy. They don't. It's not about their military. Unless it's purely military sanctions. Yep. So blocks do make it hard to attack most stuff. But eventually they'll come to heads with each other and or in spy missions against each other, which will cause countries to leave said blocks. Also, they end up doing larger amounts of political integration, which makes the blocks harder to maintain in terms of relations. So, stalemate in Korea. Okay. Neither of them is in a block. They just neither defeated the other. Probably. One of them might have won scored a political victory or some such, or forced the other to, I don't know. Korea was not reunified. China was, though, very early in the game. That sometimes happens because China starts with a claim on Taiwan. Core, I should say. Or I'm using the terms of other games. I might want to do paramilitary groups and drop it just for that quest. Experimentation with paramilitary groups. Sure, why not? Got nothing better to do. open up the economic modernization path. Lithuania join the bloc, United States, Taiwan join the bloc, China. So we get a time of extra taxing from the economic modernization 3, which might not even provide me a single income, but I get some action points at 4 and a permanent GDP growth bonus at 5, which you don't lose if you go bankrupt. So demilitarization, unit max capacity, and reduce size to army limit of countries that are considered totalitarian. Romania join the bloc of Russia. I wonder if they consider Cuba. No. Authoritarian. Kazakhstan, Indonesia. In our own world, after Castro died, Cuba reformed their political system, removing the Communist Party from the electoral system, which Marxist-Leninist countries do have electoral systems. People act like they don't because propaganda is more widespread than the truth. No, they do. Unfortunately, though, the communist parties in Marxist-Leninist states often subvert the electoral system. In fact, the system is designed around one-party state, being one-party state from the get-go in many ways. What they have usually is they have mass meetings that select basically nominees for political offices, kind of like a party primary in the United States. But then in the general election, it's just a yes-no vote. And because there's only one party, it's a yes-no vote on that person. If it's no, then they have to have another mass meeting to select another nominee. Now, the mass meetings are like town hall type meetings where people would, at least in the traditional way of doing this, because Cuba reformed this system, would elect their representatives via show of hands. Now, after Castro died, Cuba passed reforms to keep the Communist Party from being involved in the mass meetings, switched to a secret ballot for the mass meeting elections, if I'm not mistaken, and increased the ability of the citizenry to pass referendums. So direct action, direct democracy. Which is good. Increases the amount of democracy and freedom in Cuba. And people say, it's not free because you're socialist. No, it's not free because of it having this one-party state identity. In fact, capitalism runs counter to democracy, despite the bullshit claimed in this game. Immense billionaire wealth and political spending destroys democracies. Not having stuff like a universal healthcare system. Which the game has. It has increased your interventionism, and therefore a universal healthcare system makes you less democratic. That's a load of shit. You can get a substantial rewards for starting your own stock exchange. The only problem with that is, well, there's a couple. You need local financial center. Quite bloody expensive. Actually, it's not that expensive when you're so tiny. But more HCI than they currently have. Which means I need initiatives to improve that. Projects, and then there's an upfront cost. I suppose they could do it. It's a substantial score, and you can invite nations to improve diplomatic relations. Local stock exchange with that. Highway network is 3.3 for 0.04% GDP growth. transport hubs are 33 for 0.03, and a rail web 0.05 for 4.3. Stock exchange is 0.03 for a local stock exchange. It's just the local one. Suppose I could grab this for a little bit. I can't do the actual local financial center. A domestic stock exchange instead of an international one. Sure. It did an immigration policy. Probably a point system than full-scale immigration before long, but at least a domestic stock exchange would not hurt. Get to service. If I could get the service economy, then I could run a national one. Just need 50 HDI. No, I just only run the art tax relief. Yeah, that'll get me there. Maintenance costs 2 money. Whereas it's 4 or 3 for this, way more expensive. Yeah, so some art tax. Basically subsidies for the arts. It's pretty cheap. So a little bit of immigration and the Super Parents Grand Lottery have given me a little bit more population growth. Oh, yeah, I'm in the positive now. I haven't recovered even to my starting population, but over time it will. Unemployment is on the way down. Most months, anyhow. Yeah, it's still over 12%, but decreasing. Being a bit like a fly on the wall. It's a tiny nation like this. There's not always much you can do at first, but over time, conquer neighbors and get bigger, and things will destabilize. Suwalki Gap. Russia would like to create a permanent connection with Congrad. To do this, they need to control the Suwalki region of Wasia, Masuria. So, yeah, that just gave Russia a core on part of Poland. They already have on the Baltic countries. Not Belarus, strangely, but they are in a block with Belarus. They never end up annexing. They usually eventually go bankrupt and don't have Belarus in their block anymore. It's controlled by the AI. Belarus has more of a shared history with Russia. The Baltic countries, no. They have their own very separate cultures, whereas Belarus, it's a lot more common for to find Russian speakers there and such. They have a lot more shared culture with Russia. Belarusia. They probably should have core on this, not on this, but the way the game mechanics work, that would make it hard for them to maintain their block. So it's about game mechanics. Unfortunately, the AI isn't good enough to ever annex. You can annex block members peacefully. India and China are at war. They weren't before, they are now. Maybe that's what the nukes were fired over earlier. Alright. Oh yeah, I got some money for running for paramilitary groups before. Let's deactivate this. I don't need the upkeep on that. Forgot to do that. increases your militarism target, not your actual militarism. So it's not an instantaneous increase or anything. Some things will instantly increase or decrease something. Most things are just affect the targets, though. Most of its events that cause instant effects. So targets are where things will drift to in elections. So eventually war with Kosovo, but I should probably do the arts tax relief, and then I can start a stock exchange. Silly as that is. Trying to get to where my tiny economy is a little larger, and I have enough money stored up that I can at least do the stuff necessary to get at least do the infrastructure 3 without going bankrupt. And I can basically go bankrupt doing advanced industries, and that'll give my economy a huge boost. The Olympic Games, tiny country at mine, doesn't have a prayer of winning them. The AI never spends enough on this, but it's still thousands and thousands of money you have to invest to win that. Whoever wins them gets a score boost, among other things, and a GP bonus. Usually worth it for real large nations. Demonetization of authoritarian countries wouldn't affect me even if I was still. Right, interventionism decreased more, personal control again, and a slight increase in militarism because population growth increases the target. The way a game works, you want low personal control and interventionism unless you're trying to be authoritarian so you can invade countries easier, which at some point I want to do, so I can do Kosovo, although to then force them to democracy, you have to basically dip into authoritarianism, launch a war. And then return to democracy. Kind of nonsense and not the easiest thing to line up correctly. Because this game buys in the whole democracies can't invade countries nonsense, can't declare war with very low relations, neither claims or military intervention UN resolution. I mean, I could do spy actions to try and gain a war. It would cost 300 action points and 500 money. Give it a score, it succeeds, but they're annoyed if it fails. Get caught. Baltic states working together. Friendship tree, that's a prelude to them forming the Baltic Union. They have to be in block together. That and Lithuania is in a block with the US, so it might just be Latvia and Estonia. A lot of reference to old World War II era ideas like the Baltic Union in this game. There's definitely not resurgence of fascism, which many of the events refer to. No, I'm not increasing bureaucracy. Okay, got a local stock exchange. Right after art tax relief, like I can make it the next thing in this slot. I could go into the stock exchange, to a local financial center. 0.04 for 3.3 for education industry cooperation. I mean, stuff like super rails, very, very expensive. Transport hubs, even. Well, this is on. It comes from infrastructure too. It's on the way to it. Education industry cooperation is relatively cheap by comparison. See all the different things affect stuff. Like fossil fuel energy being a cheap way to increase economic growth that requires Energy Policy Office, which has a substantial upkeep. Meaning that effectively this is 5 gold, 5 money, 2 action points. For 0.2%. You do a fossil fuel energy focus, it's a little more cost effective. At that point, you require 5 natural resources just to sustain it. Hurts international relations. Can definitely be useful, though it'll contribute to global warming, which in this game, based on a number of countries that do green energy, fossil fuel, or atomic energy that influences global warming, which is the thing, at least. Well, I could do the education industry, but really, population is the main source of my economy right now. So let's grab a point system immigration and go full scale. Forget what I got diverted with before. Whatever shiny thing. But I probably should have done that earlier. Alright, Peace Planet is formed. This NGO. They want me to introduce maternity leave, basically. Which does contribute to population growth. Costs very little upkeep. Makes them happier, but it improves their relations with the world, and at higher levels can lead to a decrease in your warmonger rating. So you can do kind of eco-socialism where you run high Peace Planet, but also there's a socialist NGO, which makes it so your warmonger rating doesn't decay as fast, because apparently the whole world's afraid of you if you're socialist. Even if you've turned the whole world into your country or something, it's kind of silly. Or if the whole world was running high interventionism, it doesn't necessarily make sense. The point. And they hurt your GDP growth a little. Just a big deal. Increase warhead maintenance, decrease GDP growth, decrease natural resources. I'm going to say no. They offer very little of use. Just ignore them. If you get the socialist one, you can, and you're running Stubotnik, you can get a positive end. That's one of the few NGOs that's helpful, but most of them are just problematic to deal with. There is one like hyper-capitalist, dark government type thing that can help your GDP growth. Will make your people angry because, you know, they're getting screwed by evil corporations. They're polluting the environment. But yeah, this game did have a anti-GMO, well, the big thing is anti-GMO bias. GMOs, I even did a politics video on it, can be bad, but not because they're inherently bad, but because sometimes the evil corporations that own the intellectual property use the technology for evil. Like, you have Monsanto, which has sued farmers for seeds, for replanting seeds that they've been doing year after year just because some pollen blew into their fields from another farm that was using their proprietary crops. Like, not like they were doing anything to encourage it happening or even taking advantage of the genetic traits, mainly Roundup resistance, that those crops had anyway. It's not like they were spraying Roundup on their fields. No, it was just that they replanted crops that were, quote, contaminated. I think they tried to allege that the farm was using Roundup, but there was no evidence of it. Anyways, and of course, glyphosate, turns out there was all this nonsense to cover it up, but there's substantial evidence of it being related to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Hence, Monsanto settled the lawsuit. Of course, these big corporations always settle lawsuits so that they don't lose. But because no one has the money to fight them, they'll just drag out court cases forever. And then they can say, we haven't lost a lawsuit, so we're innocent. Bullshit. That's one of the many flaws of capitalism. I may have actually lost one lawsuit about it, one big one, class action, I'm trying to remember. But anyways, I don't remember if the lawsuit technically could officially conclude that, but glyphosate in isolation, not dangerous. Like the pure chemical, you had this representative like, oh, I literally drank a glass. It's like, oh, it's safe. No, it's not. You drank the pure chemical, which is completely safe. You didn't drink Roundup, which is glyphosate mixed with detergent. There is the fucking hitch. The detergent is what makes it dangerous, not the isolated chemical. And, even if the combination wasn't dangerous, if you drink a glass of detergent, you're going to go to the hospital. Yeah. But the thing is that the chemical is known it can cause DNA damage. Like, you can perform experiments where you have DNA not inside cells, and you can see, mixed with certain enzymes, you can see the DNA damage. There's no question it causes DNA damage to DNA if the chemical can come in contact with it. It can't cross the necessary membranes to reach DNA in cells, though. That's where the detergent comes in. It porates the membranes of cells, the plasma and nuclear. Well, I think the plasma membrane for sure. That's the outer one. I don't remember if there's the nuclear. There are actually large pores already in nuclear membranes, though there's supposed to be some regulation what can cross it. But I don't remember if glyphosate is one of those chemicals that tricks the cell into passing through those pores, or if it actually requires the detergent to porate the nuclear membrane as well. But either way, nuclear membrane doesn't present many barriers to stuff. Its cells mostly regulate what enters the cell in the first place. And so plasma membrane is porated by the detergent. Glyphosate gets inside the cell. It makes its way to the nucleus. It damages DNA there. Can't do it without detergent. As I said, the chemical itself, you could drink a glass of glyphosate on its own and then be harmless. So the guy did was pretty old when he did it. So even if it was going to cause cancer, probably wouldn't have done it before he died at his age, and he knew that. But you mix it with detergent, which of course toxic, even without. You can't drink a glass of detergent. That's like drinking a giant glass of soap. That will send you to the hospital. Which should tell you he was not doing it with detergent, even if he knew nothing else. Because he's obviously not stupid and is not going to drink a giant glass of soap, basically. Detergent isn't quite the same thing as soap, but closely related. Soap is where you saponification reactions. It's actually based on fats, and it has similar properties to the kind of chemical detergents we're talking about. Anyway, in that it can both has hydrophobic and hydrophilic ends, which allow you to dissolve hydrophobic compounds in water. That's why you use soap to clean your hands and such. And plasma membranes are made up of, they actually have hydrophilic heads, hydrophobic tails, to create a barrier that prevents anything that's either water or, to a lesser degree, fat soluble stuff isn't going to be floating around in water. Hydrophobic stuff and hydrophilic stuff can't cross the membrane because it's hydrophobic. You put pores in, stuff can cross. Detergents create the pores. Glyphosate gets into the cell, makes its way in nucleus, interacts with DNA, and the rest is history. And that's why all these people were getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, allegedly caused by glyphosate, and alleged, air quotes. I've already been harassed by one of Monsanto's internet trolls before when I did a politics video about this, but I'm a biologist. I've studied the freaking science. There's no freaking question about some of these basic facts, and I'm not just because I'm a biologist going to say this. You can read the journal articles on these things. It's pretty clear evidence, and Monsanto was, and they got caught doing this. Internal memos proved it. They were ghostwriting articles to play down the dangers of glyphosate. It wasn't other people describing. Oh yeah, Baltic Union is formed. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia joined it, and they're all in the bloc of the United States. Interesting. There are internal memos, which they had to release as part of a subpoena for a court case against them, proved their internal memos used the phrase ghostwriting, that they were ghostwriting articles. So no one can say that that's an inaccurate term when they themselves describe what they're doing as ghostwriting of articles to play down the dangers of glyphosate. Ghostwriting is where you write an article and then you just have a researcher put their name to it, claiming that they did the research, but they never did it. And you can make up whatever shit you want in ghostwriting. It's an illegal practice, of course. Because you're just basically getting researchers that add the credibility to completely false claims that you're making that you didn't actually do any research to prove, or you did intentionally biased experiments to prove. And that's what Monsanto did to try and play down the dangers of glyphosate. The Freedom Movement, I forget the exact effects of this NGO. They haven't formed yet. There we go. Slight delay. Freedom is the most important human attribute. Have less than 4 personal control. I'm on a path to that. They reduce unhappiness, reduce their personal control target further, and increase tax income. You can get some negative events, but they can be beneficial to work with. They're like Black Lives Matter and stuff. Yeah, in the game, it's often beneficial to work with them, unlike the environmentalists, which the game portrays as, even though you'll destroy the planet, the game doesn't provide many incentives to work towards preserving it. A race to the bottom type situation where you all do what's in your narrow self-interest and the planet goes to hell. I suppose that is a reasonable interpretation of how things are happening right now, except that green energy is often a worthwhile investment. It's less expensive than the game portrays to do the technological research. The main costs are in rolling out the actual infrastructure. Alright. She's an hour and 34 minutes. This game can be slow, and I want to show you folks a decent amount of content in the first video, but full-scale immigration, this massive increases in happiness, but massive increases population growth. Probably need to increase my military a bit in case I get riots as a result of it, though. By riots, I mean the way this game works. Revolts. We're not talking... is it not showing? I want to see the little pop-up society map. Anyways, peace between India and China. And I just left the block of India. Getting a little bit of score income now due to population growth. Positive population growth increases your score. Negative actually can lead to, will decrease it. I don't think you can get negative score growth if I remember, but you can certainly get 0 due to it. Of course, population works against you much of the game, so it's a trade-off. When it works against you and you're big and you already have a large population, you only need a certain amount. This will increase my score growth though for a while. Help me to get my economy bigger. A crucial political base coming. What strategy should we take? Focus on our candidate. Undermine the opponent. Undermine the opponent is generally the safer thing in this game. Full scale immigration. Attained. Should have rapid population growth, which also increase the militarism target. Working on that stock exchange. Probably should do the energy policy office. Just need to get my economy large enough that I can do the infrastructure investment. Don't have to get much larger, just need to not go bankrupt too quickly. Success. Arcana has won the debate. +10 score, +2% unhappiness because they undermine the opponent. And reduced chance for influence operations in other countries to fail. Alright, well, that's enough for now. Save this, maybe I'll come back to it later. Maybe I won't. I have some serious complaints against the devs of this game. There are a lot of things wrong with it. There are some things that are right with it too. It's not a completely flawed game. But I will probably never be happy with the devs given that they decided to be complete assholes when I asked them to fix a bug. And probably feel unapologetic about it to this day. Bad economic situation. What? I didn't get an event for that. Unless it was there from the start of the game. Unemployment growth is still positive. The GDP is growing nicely, though. The world economy is currently booming. That helps. Fun, although I'm running a deficit keeping my taxes so low, which is gonna be a problem sooner or later. Well, enough with this. This is going to be too long even for a first video, and the others will have to be shorter. Well, I wish you folks all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind yourselves, and may you always find a gangster to lead you home. Till next time, there's Bune. This is Northstar. Adieu, and best luck.